It is my pleasure at this point to introduce William Ruff, who will be the moderator of this second panel. And I'm just going to get out of the way and turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Eric. I'm Bill Ruff. I'm from a faculty member at the Ed Leadership Program at Montana State University. And it's my pleasure to be the moderator for this panel. I want to thank everybody for your engagement and your commitment to children just in being here and being at our session up at Missoula and in Havre. So I'd start by introducing everyone. I'd first like to introduce Kelly Rosenleaf, who's the Executive Director of our Child Care Resource and Referral Network. She delivers professional development to child care providers and manages the Best Beginnings Child Care Scholarship Program. She's been involved in the planning and implementation of several child care quality initiatives, including Montana Stars to Quality, mini grants, accreditation, distance learning, and the proposed public pre-K initiative.
Thank you.
Next, to her left, is Kurt Miller, and Kurt Miller is the Executive Director of the School Administrators of Montana. Kurt served Montana as a teacher, high school principal, adjunct professor, superintendent in several of our districts, and Education Association executive director during his 33 years as an educator. He's had the opportunity to serve Montana students in every size community from Class C to AA schools across the geography of the state. Kurt has practiced lifelong learning by completing his formal education at Montana. Well, it says here Montana University System, but he's an MSU grad.
You're in trouble now.
All of this is for almost 2 decades, earning his doctorate in school administration and leadership from MSU Bozeman. Next is Mary Jane Stendert, and she is the Executive Director of the Montana Head Start Association. Mary Jane has been an early childhood professional her entire adult life, starting in child care, private preschool, then Head Start, Even Start, and then has been a college instructor. She's received her master's degree in child development from MSU, and for 15 years, she was Montana Head Start Collaboration Director. And in retirement now, she's the Executive Director of the Montana Head Start Association and teaches early childhood classes at in Western. And last but certainly not least, Joe Brott, who's the Director of Policy Service for the Montana School Boards Association. Joe has been the Director of Policy Services for Montana Schools Association now for the past 12 years. And prior to that, he served 20 years as a superintendent in 3 schools in Montana. We've heard in the last panel about the visions and the progress being made towards some of those visions. And this panel now will explore the readiness of our institutions to continue educating our children, starting at the early childhood level. Looking for the name of the panel. The readiness for expansion of the integration, assessing institutional structures, and taking stock of our assets. And with that, who would like to go first?
We should start with schools.
I guess I'll start first. I'll begin my comments by just offering a word of thanks. You know, it's always invigorating to be able to engage in the dialogue around what's best for kids in the state of Montana. And I've been fortunate in my career to have chosen this as a profession. And it really does end up making a difference when we get into the room like this and discuss what the issues are. And so for my little part, I guess what I would like to do is focus upon the challenge of how to meet the educational needs of our youngest children. That's really what's in front of us. There are strategies that were very clearly outlined in the last panel and the work that's been done. The research is very clear on the benefits of early childhood education, and you folks in this room really are the experts. In my mind, what we know from that research, I would just say that students are more likely to stay in school when they have the benefit of early childhood education, attend college or a trade school, and have higher earning potential throughout their entire lifetime. That's a pretty important thing for our state and, quite frankly, for our nation to have that happen. Academically, we also know that there's an increase in cognition as a result of that programming and increased competency both behaviorally and emotionally along the way. So in a nutshell, that's how I would put together all of those studies and all of the research that's out there, and also raise the importance of what the issue is. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, this issue has become politicized. And that's exactly where we're at right now. We want to talk about implementation and how to make it happen in Montana. And whenever something becomes politicized, it adds to what the need is to communicate effectively. And so hopefully through the dialogue today, we'll have some more tools in our toolkit to communicate effectively. The research that I looked into still shows that 43% of Montana's 3- and 4-year-olds above the poverty line are attending preschool. That's 6% below the national average. So only 3% or 43% above the poverty line are attending preschool. Only 37% of Montana's 3- and 4-year-olds below the 200% of poverty line are attending the preschool. That's a 6% margin where we can close the gap. If we work together to do this the right way. And I think that 43% number is probably a number that we need to move up in the scale over the period of time. And there's programming that has been offered that did get politicized through the process. The effort of Early Edge, I think, raised many, many questions and engaged Montanans in the discussion. So though the bill did, the work did not pass, there's a couple of things I would take away from that. Number one, you have a governor who is tenacious and staying with an issue. And I've been around for a long time. When you have the top official of the state taking a stand on an issue that's related to benefiting children across the state, I think we need to embrace that and we need to celebrate it. And the fact that there wasn't success necessarily in the 2015 session, and that the governor is just more enthused and more engaged with that, puts all of us in a position of being able to say, we're probably going to make this happen. It might take a little more time, but we're going to be able to make this happen, and we're going to do it the Montana way. I want to recognize that the comments that I'm making here largely come from a collaborative work of the Montana Public Education Center. MPEC, as we're fondly referred to, is the cooperation of a cooperative effort of the executive directors of the MASBO, the school business officials, MEA, MFT, MQEC, the Montana Quality Education Coalition, the Montana Rural Education Association, MREA, the School Boards Association, and Joe is here, and school administrators in Montana. And it's pretty unique in our makeup that we meet on a regular basis and we talk about the biggest issues affecting children in Montana. And a couple of things happen. Number one, by meeting together and having those kinds of conversations, we decide what we would believe we can all agree to support, so that advocacy realm becomes a key element. And even more important to that is we clearly identify what we can't agree to. For we all represent, different bodies that are out there in Montana, different associations. And what we've found is the strength of being able to know what we agree to, and then to minimize those kinds of things where we don't see eye to eye without imploding on each other, really helps us in that advocacy realm. And so the reason why I give you that bit of context is I want you to know that that group, MPEC, were strong supporters of Early Edge Montana. And in fact, we wrote part of what we do also is to write, brief papers around, we call them issue spotlights, around those most contemporary issues that are there, so that it is a rally point for being able to work in that advocacy realm, which again I think is going to end up being pretty important in the next round here. So the issue spotlight on Early Edge Montana, if you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at that, we need to make that available to you. And really what it does is it outlines the questions. It outlines the big things that came about when the implementation was to be started and how we would solve what those issues are when the rubber meets the road. Or yesterday I was at a panel, and in academia it's where the rubber meets the sky, right? On the things that we're working with. And that can be taken a lot of ways, but quite frankly, we need to set our goals high, and we need to keep moving forward with what the issues are. So when I reflect just a bit on readiness for expansion and integration, my comments would be this. I represent school administrators, the Professional Association for School Administrators in Montana. That would be superintendents and principals and special ed directors and technology directors and county superintendents. And we're about 1,000 strong when you get everybody together. And so it is a very strong advocacy voice. It is also the foundation and leadership of what happens in our communities throughout Montana as related to education. That group of people are the influence makers on what's happening in your public schools and how well, in some cases, you're taking care of the children within your community. And so I'll boldly say that if it's to be, it probably is going to have to fall somewhat on the shoulders of those school district leaders and principals, school leaders, to be able to rally the community and communicate effectively with the community to develop the programming that's necessary. As I reflect on all of the things that happened during the 2015 session and before that, the rulemaking and the standards and all of the, crossing the T and dotting the I kinds of things that were done preliminarily, where we went south is the fact that when you get into the details of how it is to happen in an individual community, we're all different. And so if it is going to end up happening, we need to be able to, like the MPEC group, we need to acknowledge that we're all strongly behind wanting early childhood education for our children, and that we will figure out a way to make that happen within our own local community. And I think that's right where we're at right now. It's probably the reason for this whole get-together is that the ideas for how do we make implementation work in every community around the state of Montana. I personally believe that school administrators and those school boards in those local communities have a huge responsibility. And so I'll say it again, if it's to be, it's probably going to happen as a result of effective communication, knowing their own community, and being able to put the programming in place with partnerships, etc. I also believe that public-private government partnerships are likely the best path and maybe the only path that we have that are going to make that work. I mean, during the last panel, you could see the entities of Head Start and other private entities that already have programming going, and then this public, bringing the public together and having that involved also. We as Montanans in our own communities need to sit down and figure out how to work that out if the implementation is actually going to be there. Everybody needs to have their say, and then decisions need to be made on, and here's how we're going to do it, and that will work for Miles City and Thompson Falls and across the state of Montana. And your schools are definitely a player in what that is. And they have, quite frankly, the most experience with being able to communicate effectively with the community at large around educational issues. So, I would ask us all to continue to remember that, and to my colleagues that I represent out there, thank you for the great work that you do and continued essence and push of having preschool education become part of what we do for children. A couple of other things. Managing the disruption of existing programs is a very big issue. Okay, that was part of the how it goes south. when you're in testimony in front of the legislature or in front of a committee, and there are people that are standing at the mic saying, we just don't need this as a result of we've already taken care of it in our community, or we have private partnerships that already take care of everything that we need, that ends up causing issues in the end product under advocacy. Because then there are legislators who are representing their own community saying, we just don't need that, so let's not spend the state's money or anybody else's money on doing something like that because my community is already taken care of. And I believe it behooves all of us to continue to talk about the larger scope of what this is about. Only 43% of children in Montana are receiving preschool services along the way. And with all of the data that's out there, we need to do better than that. And so we have to work together as Montanans and get beyond what is just exactly what's happening in my community, or solve what is happening in your community so that you can deliver in a way that is necessary to meet the needs of the children that are in your community. So the solutions to all of that probably rest in this room of how to work out programs that are already in existence and managing the disruption for those folks that are probably doing a pretty good job with the ones that are in place. And now we have standards of which to measure that by, and I think that part is important too. The second item I would bring to the table is quality staffing. Okay, making this work, and this is a lifelong effort across the state of Montana, is, does an educator license really mean something? Okay. You really have to ask that question, because there are privatizers that are out there and people who would make profit off of the enterprise of public education, and nearly all of those efforts say, and you do not have to have a license to practice the craft. And they're cropping up all over the United States in charter schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the educators that are working in those environments, in some instances, were working and took a test, and the next day they were a teacher. Okay? Well, quite frankly, that rubs me just the wrong way because of the profession that I chose, and I think it probably rubs you the wrong way. But then there is the essence and the nexus of where the heavy requirement of training to do a good job and provide a quality job at the early childhood level for our children, where that crosses with there's too many demands and we can't get enough people trained up to be able to meet the needs. Okay, and we always, forever in Montana, we've debated that question: is where's the perfect spot that the demands are not so much that, and the quality issues are still being met. And I think early childhood, once again, now has raised that question. What we do know is that there's 330 educators in our state that already have early childhood competency, and if we could put all of those folks to work and in communities all over Montana, that would be wonderful, and we might be able to meet the needs that are there. And there are those that are close to licensure, and I heard Clay Christian, when he was talking from the Board of Regents, describing that all units of the university system will make it convenient. They will work hard to make sure licensure is available to early childhood educators, and they'll work with them so that they can finish their program. Well, there's been an intervening factor now that has come to light since the beginning discussion on early ed and putting all of this together, and that, quite frankly, is an educator shortage. And it's real. In Montana, there are schools that started the school year this year without staff, without a teacher for a classroom in Montana. And unfortunately, the focus of where the problem is, for the most part, is in our small rural schools as compared to the larger AA districts. And so when you add to the mix that there is a shortage of finding a high-quality elementary teacher or a math teacher or a special educator in those environments, that now we're going to have a preschool program and we need to find a highly qualified preschool teacher to the mix, it's compounded. Is it solvable? Absolutely it is solvable, but it's going to take all of us in Montana to work together, not only on qualifications for early childhood, but also on solutions to the recruitment and retention of high-quality educators to stay in Montana, to be Montanans, to serve our children into the future. So there's a complication that's there. That was one of the issues. I mean, that was an issue at the table in 2015 in the legislature that potentially what caused, part of the issue to go south. Is that, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm pretty good at what I do, and I'm not going back to school to get the license to make that happen. And we have to find ways to make that convenient in those communities where what I just described to you, so that they can get licensed, and we can assure that there's a mechanism of quality still in Montana for our educators. Third, I would say facilities. My professor, Dr. John Cole, who I took facilities class from, is staring me down right now, and yes, Professor, those issues haven't gone away in Montana. And unfortunately, we haven't invested in the community's investment in our school facilities all across the state, and now we're probably reaching crisis stage with what that looks like. But when you look at the niche of preschool programs, already full facilities, it's a challenge to add a program and say we're going to have space to be able to have that happen. And that's not everywhere, because there's declining enrollment in certain areas, but there are certain places that they're full. And to add preschool programs to what's already going on is a deep challenge, and we need to wrestle with how that looks, and that is very local also. And it requires, in many cases, voter support for adding on to facilities. It also would require some out-of-the-box thinking in that if facilities already exist in your community and you can partner with that to make it happen, there's where the preschool programs could take place. So I just bring that out because that too is another I've outlined three, which are really challenges. And then I'll characterize this last challenge as staging the implementation. I think that a lot of administrators that I have talked with and worked with on this very issue understand that all or nothing is probably a difficult thing to do in the implementation of preschool in your community. If there could be a period of time in which we're going to start with this group of kids, and it's this big, and we're going to see how the program can work, and then we're going to continue to build on it until we have the ability to offer it to all 4-year-olds, okay? I know that there are equity issues that get involved with that, and I know there are a lot of political folks that will weigh in on what that looks like. I just really believe that we need to keep that in front of us as we move forward. That staging in the implementation is likely the best way to make that work in most every community across the state. And I think the grant work that's going on and those models that are out there are really going to be helpful for us when we look at broader implementation. I just ask you to keep that in mind. I guess that, that's just a couple of comments from me. I would reference you to, about 40 different items that were questions that are in this issue spotlight, and I probably should have made copies and brought it, but we can get you a website address so that you can gain access to what that looks like before we're done today. With that, I'm looking forward to engaging in the conversation with the rest of our panelists and with you.
Joe, would you like to go next?
Again, same way with Kirk, thank you very much for allowing me to represent the Montana School Boards Association in this conference. A couple of things to start with. I want to follow up with Kirk. He talked about MPEC. What I left out at the registration table are some booklets, and it's called The Great Works of Montana Public Schools, which was put together by all of the state educational organizations. It's an excellent document and booklet, so when you go out at lunch or get a break, I know I don't have enough for everybody, but pick one up. And the same thing, if you would like to have more, we can certainly get you more, okay? I want to talk a little bit from, and as Bill said, I'm the policy director for the Montana School Boards Association. The Montana School Boards Association is an organization that works for the trustees of the state of Montana, of all the school districts. There are approximately maybe a little over 1,500 trustees in the state of Montana, so we have quite a few. Approximately 3 years ago, before Governor Bullock's Early Edge program that came out. And I say that because the program or the policy that we put together, we kind of got some feedback of saying, so you're doing this now because the Early Edge program was defeated in the legislature. No, we didn't, all right? The Montana School Boards Association, myself along with our executive director, Lance Melton, about 3 years ago, started working on a policy that would guide districts in a process to enroll students under the exceptional circumstances meriting the waiver of age requirements for pupils under the age of 6, and of course receive A and B funding from the state. Kind of how this came about. There are many school districts in the state of Montana, and we all know how this state, the geographic area, the distance between a lot of things. Not every school district has the availability and the advantage of some, all right? And a lot of school districts are saying, we need to educate our young kids, all right? But we can't maybe afford it because as districts go, we do not get funded for it, okay? Well, if you know our executive director, Lance, he's pretty good into the law, all right, to put it that way. So we put together this policy, and it's based on the Montana statute. And the Montana statute says that the trustees may at their discretion assign and admit a child to a school in the district who is under 6 years of age if there are exceptional circumstances that merit waiving the age provision. And the law does not define exceptional circumstances. So therefore, each board of trustees in a district has the ability to determine the exceptional circumstances which may fit their district. So in keeping that in mind, all right, we developed a policy which basically is a program, and I want to say at the front, it's an optional program. It's not one that we're telling districts you have to implement or you must, but it's an optional one. It is not a program for every school district. And earlier in the first panel, I heard Great Falls speak, all right? But there are a number of communities in the state of Montana where they have excellent preschool programs. They have excellent Head Start programs, all right? And the boards and the administrators in those districts are saying, we are very comfortable in our district that when our kids come into kindergarten, that they are prepared. And our response is perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. But there are districts in the state of Montana that don't have that possibility. And they feel that their children coming in at kindergarten are not as prepared as they need to be. So this policy or program that we help develop is a guide, all right? It's an avenue that allows school districts to bring these young children, 4 to 5-year-olds, okay, under exceptional circumstances and get them ready for kindergarten, okay? It is not a preschool. And I say that because it is specific in state law, okay? The Office of Public Instruction, Montana, does not fund preschool, okay? So when we put this together, we definitely made it, or are making it very clear to these districts, you cannot call it preschool. If you call it preschool, you're not going to get the funding for it, all right? And a lot of this was a way for school districts to get these kids in, receive funding for it so they can afford to do it. So it's not a preschool, all right? So what the Montana School Boards Association did in conjunction with the Office of Public Instruction, and especially with Deputy Superintendent Dennis Parman, okay? We defined a variety of areas of exceptional circumstances that could easily be documented to justify the enrollment of each child, all right? And that districts may define additional specific circumstances that may fit those. A couple of things when developing this to make sure that the programs and the districts were accountable, right? The students enrolled in this program must be approved by the Board of Trustees prior to what we call the first A and B count, which is in October, right? In order for the school district to get funding for these kids, they have to be approved by the Board of Trustees, right? So the board knows, I guess, number one, that we have the program, how many kids we have, all right, and what's going to happen. The program requires that the teacher of this has to be a certified teacher with a K-8 elementary endorsement, right, to proceed. There is outlined through the Office of Public Instruction a curriculum, all right, for kindergarten, pre-K, whatever. So the enhancement is, this is the curriculum you should follow to bring those 4 to 5 year olds in under the kind of under a preschool curriculum, but so when they go into kindergarten, they are ready. Right? We made it very clear to help is that if you have this program, that once they go through the pre-kindergarten, 1/2 kindergarten, they do not jump into first grade. Right? This is a transition program to get them to go from half-time kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, into the regular kindergarten program. All right? And again, one of those was to help school districts to say that we are not going to allow a parent, I guess, to come in and say, well, my child now did this pre-kindergarten and they're so smart, we want them to go right into first grade. That's not the process of the program. It's a transition to help with early childhood education. A couple of things I just want to run through is that so within this program, a school district has a couple of options. We give them 2 options. You can enroll these students under a student-specific exceptional circumstance. And some examples of that would be that the child must be at least 3 years of age with a disability qualifying the child for services under IDEA. A child who is 4 years of age or older on or before the September 10th deadline of the school year in which to enroll. So maybe some of the criteria could be that the child meets the income eligibility guideline for free and reduced price meals under the National School Lunch Program. The limited English proficient within the meaning of Title III of the ESEA Act. Maybe the child is gifted and talented within the meaning of the terms of gifted and talented. The child is an enrolled member of a federally recognized American Indian tribe. And the child is homeless. Okay. So a district can look in their community and say, do we have any of these children 4 to 5 years of age who are not in any other preschool program, okay, that are sitting out there missing, that we can maybe help for early education, all right? So that's the one option. You can enroll them under a specific individual child. Or we have the option where the exceptional circumstances would be present in the community. Right? And kind of the same link. Let's say maybe the homeless rates of the districts and pupils in comparison to statewide average. Okay, what is the homeless rate in our community versus the statewide average? Are we greater? The percentage of districts qualifying for services under IDA in comparison to the statewide average. The percentage of the district's pupils eligible for free and reduced lunch in comparison to statewide average, and as we go through. There are districts in the state of Montana, okay, where those rates, those percentages are much higher than the state average, all right? One other example could very well be that there are no other programs within our district, all right? So we're developing this program, based on the community. We have no daycare centers. We have no preschool. We have no Head Start. And we have a number of our students, 4 to 5 year olds, that are out there, and there is nothing for them. So this is a way for us as a school district to start implementing a program so that we can help parents and ourselves and our district for these kids to come in at kindergarten ready to roll and become good, productive citizens in our district. I guess with that, okay, just a couple of numbers. I think the fear was, okay, and the fear was from our office is that, all right, if we get this rolling, what is it going to cost, all right? And we have had districts, as I've said earlier, said, this isn't for us. We're not going to take away from our preschools in the city. We're not going to take away from our Head Start. We are not going to take away from our daycares, all right? Because that's income probably for those people that we as a district, we don't want to harm in our district, all right? So when we look at kind of statistics on this, in the fall of 2014, I'm just going to go back 1 year, okay? There were 80 students reported to OPI for this, okay? OPI funded 76, all right? And that's good because the criteria, some did not meet. 25 districts were involved in the program, right? Since this guideline, I guess, policy came out, this avenue for districts to use, this fall, 231 students were reported, all right? That was an increase of 34.6% of kids, all right? 198 of those students were funded, okay? An increase of 38%. But what I found is interesting is that 34 districts reporting, okay? So that was only an increase of 0.7%, all right? Which is all right. You know, we're not harming that, all right? Because again, it goes back to some districts are saying, you know, it's not for us. There are some districts that are running their own preschool program out of their own pocket and not getting funded for OPI, which is fine, okay? But it kind of, to sum it up for us, through our Montana School Boards Association, as we look at early childhood education and what can we do, okay? We look at it from aspects of what do we need to get out to our trustees and to our administrators, all right, for them as an awareness. What are some programs that they could look at to get involved with their district that would help them bring these kids in so that they are ready for kindergarten and they are ready for elementary and high school as they go through. With that, I will
Move on.
Move on, okay.
Morning. I hope I can be heard because sometimes it's hard. I hope you all believe in repetition because all of the wonderful people ahead of me have already said everything that I wanted to say. So I did come prepared to just share with this audience some facts about Head Start. Because we are talking about Head Start, we're talking about school districts. Most of us have a pretty clear picture of what schools are like, because we've all attended them, but we have not all attended a Head Start program. And so I just was going to define Head Start for everybody so you have a common place to start from. Head Start is a federally funded program. It's meant to be a comprehensive child and family development program. It's not just a preschool. There's no state involvement or monitoring or oversight of Head Start programs. And there is an annual grant renewal. They're funded per child. They're supposed to be providing comprehensive services to all enrolled children and their families. In Montana, we serve 4,800 children. Probably a little bit more than that with the recent grant opportunities that you've heard of. The word comprehensive in Head Start means the full range of services that a person needs in their life. It might be health services, it might be food, it might be clothes, it's also education, whether it's the parent or the child. So it really does involve a lot. And it also includes mental health services, social, emotional education. It involves staff education and parent education. So that's a lot. It isn't just a preschool. Eligibility for Head Start is children that are at 100% of the federal poverty level or lower, with at least 10% of those having disabilities, and 10% can be over income. These are the most vulnerable, most needy, most challenged children in our communities. But most of them thrive and are successful, and we find that that success has to do with the parent involvement. The comprehensive nature of Head Start is what does set it apart from the other early childhood programs. Child care is intended to care for children while parents work, and parents pay a fee for that, and the state pays a child care subsidy for the low-income children. Children are also being educated, whether they know it or not, or whether the provider intends it or not. They're all being educated as while they're being cared for. But the child care provider is usually the first eyes that spot the difficulties and the needs, and they do become an informal support and referral system for parents, but they're not paid to do that, not like the Head Start programs are. The public schools are sort of in between. They're funded to educate, but they end up caring for children and taking care of many of the needs that children have, and many of the needs that maybe even families have. But that's not, serving the family is generally, in my opinion, not the first priority of the school. It's to educate the child. So there's a difference. We approach things from a little bit different philosophy. We're funded to do a little bit different work, but we're all working with the same children. Head Start starts right at the very beginning at enrollment, asking and inquiring, finding out from the family what their needs are, what their goals are for themselves and for their children, and for even other family members. They have family advocates that check in with the parents regularly. It's very time-consuming, it's very expensive, and it's very exhausting, but it does make a difference. Head Start has full-time people that are focused on mental health, nutrition, education, community partnerships, and education of staff and education of parents. Many of our programs are also licensed child care programs in Montana, and we have extensive quality control measures to follow according to the Head Start performance standards. Head Start serves children ages 3 to 5 years old. Early Head Start serves pregnant women and babies prenatal to age 3. Most Head Start centers are part-day, but most provide some form of full-day service. Early Head Start is mostly full-day. All programs offer some form of home visiting. Currently, the federal government is funding some sites to create early Head Start child care partnerships, which were mentioned earlier, where the Head Start program partners with community child care providers who are already in business to serve early Head Start eligible children. There's other models that a program could choose to do, but that is generally what people are choosing to do. Many years ago, programs were asked to do the same kind of work and had the funding. Montana attempted and was successful for a while with many child care providers in Montana, but it turned out to be not financially sustainable, and program monitoring reviews suffered. Partnering with a private business that has some autonomy was much harder than people had realized. But in the current effort, we do see more consideration for the child care provider and the business part of child care, and we see an emphasis on the comprehensive services, and there's more money involved, so that always helps to support the adults and the families. Also, right now, many of our Head Start programs, as you heard, are involved with a grant from OPI, the Preschool Development Grant, which really, you heard from Terry Barclay, there's been a series of literacy grants, and now those programs were just really poised with a relationship with OPI, and were able to step into the requirements of the Preschool Development Grant. This grant encourages Head Start programs in public schools to expand educational services for 4-year-olds and raise wages for preschool teachers, which is desperately needed, and improve environments. But one thing we've already learned is that Head Start has different and very high expectations that a lot of programs were not ready to meet. So we need to learn more about each other. Comprehensive services are needed and must be included, or we just have another kindergarten. Without the full range of services and a responsive and inclusive system of care and education, we end up with children do burn out early, and families who do not make changes. And so then it's hard to sustain what you've put into that early childhood time in their lives. All of our programs also operate with and follow the Montana Early Learning Standards, which address the best practices in child development, environments, and curriculum. Office of Public Instruction created, with a lot of early childhood people involved, a shorter version of those standards for the schools if they had a pre-K program that they would follow. Many of our programs, the Head Start programs, also are involved with the Stars to Quality sites under the state's Best Beginnings Child Care purview, and most take part in the voluntary Early Childhood Professional Development System located at the Early Childhood Project at MSU. Most of our teachers either have a BA degree or are working towards that. Some have a master's degree or a second degree, but still work for very low wages and limited benefits. Head Start has proven in all of these past relationships that they are ready and willing to partner, but still they have to remain true to the Head Start requirements and the performance standards and the expectations, no matter who they partner with, because they still have to follow those federal rules. Investing in expansion and integration is really admirable and essential. I think I've been preaching it for probably 20 years. But it has to be done thoughtfully, sustainably, and equitably, so that we can maximize the success rate for the children, because that's really what we all want. That's what we're all here to do. Children do not need to necessarily know more. There's so much out there that they already know and that they already have access to. They need to live in protective and productive families that will be their lifelong teachers. So we can never separate the children from the families at this young age. It isn't possible. It isn't a best practice. And so you really, when you talk, my definition of pre-K involves the family. There are many examples across the country of how states, communities, and school systems have partnered with Head Start to provide those comprehensive services for a wider income range of children. This is the most successful model since Head Start is already funded. And then you include the state or the community money to serve a wider variety of children. Integrating children from different parts of the community is healthy and provides more of a realistic group situations for children to grow up in. Anytime we can minimize confusion for parents and minimize transporting children around, we're doing a good thing. It's very difficult work, blending funding, overlapping professionals and expertise, melding educational philosophies and strategies on how to best serve each family and child. The Federal Office of Head Start has been encouraging Head Start to do this for nearly 20 years that I am aware of, and probably long before that. It's very messy, it's challenging, and it can cause wider gaps than we intended, but it can work. It can work very well if we take it very seriously and if it's well planned. If people are honest and all parties respect and value each other where we're at professionally and what we're trying to accomplish with the families. But when we are partnering with other early childhood programs, most of us have realized that we're willing, we're interested, we all have the right intentions, but sometimes things get difficult and there are issues. And some people have already mentioned those issues. Top one on my list is equal wages for an equal college education. If a early childhood teacher has a BA in early childhood and a public school teacher has a BA in elementary ed, aren't those the same level of commitment? Shouldn't they have the same level of compensation? It certainly is the same level of work because I'm teaching early childhood classes and I'm teaching elementary ed teachers. And for since 1992, teachers have been telling me that we in early childhood are learning a lot more in early childhood because we concentrate on the family and we concentrate on child development, and it helps the practices in the classroom. So evening out the eligibility for children, so there isn't the costly and time-consuming issues about who's eligible for what and when. Happens to be a very difficult issue in Head Start because the eligibility for Head Start starts at a different time than like childcare eligibility, so that's something that always needs to be worked on. Then trusting our partners. Whenever you've had to partner in any situation, you have to have a high level of trust. Work in trust comes with building relationships and communicating. Working out expectations and being able to articulate what is expected and taking the time to understand why those expectations are important or what things can work as a compromise. It's very important to get those clear up front. Another issue is monitoring, determining what monitoring method is going to be used when programs are blended. Oftentimes this isn't thought about ahead of time because in Head Start we have very strong monitoring requirements, and I know school districts do too, but they're different. Once I worked as a Head Start reviewer in a program in Colorado that included reviewers from Head Start, which are all hired by the Office of Head Start, but then reviewers from the Colorado Department of Education. Since the program that we were reviewing had funding from both, they wanted to try a combined reviewing situation. So the monitor, it was very interesting, it was very challenging and very extensive, but it worked very well, and it was an education for all of us that were involved, not just the people in the program. I think the people in the program were very glad to see us all leave, but we all left understanding each other better and understanding our requirements a lot better. And finding common ground, which was really exciting. Another issue, when we discuss making changes or doing something differently or integrating programs, I think we have to have a clear picture in our mind, because I have a very definite, clear picture about what I call pre-K or what I call preschool or what I call childcare. But you might have a different picture. And so it's really important to communicate about that and not just use the words and think that everybody understands them the same way. We have to be sure we define all the details of what that looks like. People here have mentioned facilities, which are close to a nightmare situation in many of our communities in Montana. Where are the meals going to come from? Because in Head Start we feed children. We feed them a lot and often. And schools feed children, but do we do it differently? Is it all the same expectations? We have to get those clarified. Wages throughout the program, not just the teachers, but for everyone. Who will do what and when? And what are appropriate practices for a 4-year-old as opposed to a 5-year-old? They are different. They are different little human beings and they require different attention. And so we have to make sure that we understand that. I think quality early childhood cannot be done without comprehensive services. And I don't care what education level or income level we refer to, all of us, when we were young parents, we need comprehensive services. Maybe it's on a continuum. Maybe some families don't need it as often or as intense as other families, but we all need to know what the resources are. We all need to know suggestions. We all need to know from time to time there's a referral that we need. We need to understand child development. We need to understand ourselves as parents. And oftentimes we don't have that. We might have had our grandmother or some other connection, but a lot of times people don't have that today. And so whether you have a really good job that pays a lot of money and you have a very advanced degree, you might still need that help. So I think it's important no matter what income level we're talking about. Another thing that can be an issue is the professional status. Elementary education is farther ahead in the evolution process of being a profession than early childhood. They have evolved from needing very little, a teacher needing very little training, having very low wages. They were lucky if they got a community stipend and a place to live when they were teachers, maybe 100 years ago. Now they have to have a 4-year degree plus, and they usually receive good wages, or at least very decent wages. They have benefits, health benefits and other benefits, as well as being unionized. My own mother was a middle school teacher with a 2-year college degree and no benefits. So it's changed a lot in a short period of time. The early childhood field of study really only started after World War II, when there was a huge need for childcare because women had to work. And then the beginning of Head Start in 1965. But we've traveled, or at least tried to travel at breakneck speed to get to the point that we're at today. We're focused on a very young, very vulnerable age group of children. Even at their healthiest, they are the most vulnerable children, that 0 to 5-year-old age group. And it's very important to not forget that they exist in a family with parents who need the help and the support. So when we talk about school readiness, we also believe that parents need to be ready for school, and that's our job in early childhood. It's not only to get the child ready, but get the parents ready. One last comment. I think that Head Start is ready. All of our programs have proven that in the way that they've taken on many of the challenges that have been had different expectations than what they're used to. And if you can think about the intense requirements that just a Head Start program has to meet the federal requirements, then you add on the different state layers, and you add on different community layers. Head Start programs are jumping through a lot of hoops, and it's hard for them. They used to be sort of invisible. They're not anymore. Everybody seems to know where they're at because they're really putting themselves out there and going the extra mile. So yes, I think they are ready for expansion and integration with different early childhood programs, and they're very willing. I think we have, they've, like I said, definitely proven that they are capable and willing. They are ready to listen, they're ready to put money and facts on the table, but cannot compromise the principles and best practices that they know are essential and required for young children to be successful. So I know nobody is asking Head Start programs to do that, but when you serve that vulnerable age group and that lowest income level of our society, it becomes, they're very focused on that. And it's hard to think broader. We want to, and they're ready to do that. But we really need to do a lot of communicating before that happens. So we're ready to think creatively and be part of the process and be the partner, because we have very, very strong practices and very strong programs in Montana, which I'm proud to say to be a part of, because I've been in many other states, I've talked to many other states, and I know that the programs in Montana are some of the best in this part of the whole United States. So thank you for having Head Start here. Sometimes we whine and moan because we aren't included, and so we appreciate being here and having a say and being ready to be creative with all of you.
Child care resource and referral organizations around the state deliver services, professional development services to early childhood professionals, primarily child care providers, some Head Start folks, and occasionally some preschool teachers. And then we deliver that subsidy program, that scholarship program that allows low-income families to pay for childcare. So we definitely have a two-generation strategy. We're working with childcare facilities in nearly every community of this state. There are just over 1,100 childcare facilities in Montana, licensed childcare facilities in little tiny towns and in cities. And they are ranging from home-based businesses that serve 6 children with 1 adult in the home. Then there are group homes. They serve 12 children with 2 adults. And then there are centers, and they serve more than 12 children, and their number of adults depends on how many children and how big their facility is. There's a square footage requirement. Very many of those programs do not serve infants at all because the staff-child ratio for infants is 1 adult for only 4 babies. And while parents pay more, they can't pay enough more to pay the staff and make that pencil out. So there's, in a home setting where they're going to mix age group up, very often they do serve babies in a home setting, and an infant is up to 2 years old. But there are many centers that just financially cannot serve infants. And when some of you are business leaders, sometimes you can have a loss leader. You know, you can sell soda pop for hardly anything, and then when people are in the store, they buy more things, so you have a better profit margin. There's not much of a profit margin on childcare, so you can't make up that loss leader of infant care in a center. So that's why we don't have it. It doesn't make sense economically, because centers would like to serve infants. They just simply can't afford to, a lot of them, and they're forced to make a business choice. So that's a reality. So we have a lot of these programs around the state. We don't have very many centers in Montana that serve over 100 children, just because of the nature of our communities, the size of our communities. So it's a very decentralized system as far as being ready to partner with the Office of Public Instruction and to build a pre-K system that includes these facilities. It's a very decentralized system to deliver it, and so that alone presents some challenges for working with those existing community-based programs. There's no centralized curriculum, no standard core competencies. There is the Montana Early Learning Standards, and we're working very hard to get those implemented in all of those programs. But they have a lot of choice because they are private businesses. They employ folks that are paraprofessionals, some folks that don't even have high school degrees, up to advanced level degree people. And just because I've scrawled many things on the side of my paper, it's good I'm not presenting later today, or I couldn't read it. Early childhood degrees are the lowest paying college degree in the nation and in Montana. And as a result of that, we turn people over. We turn them over in these programs all the time. Head Start has a new standards. They've been there for a few years. They have to get their people degreed, and as soon as they do, they lose them to the school system, to the K through 3 classroom, because schools can pay better. That is not acceptable. We have to fix that. These are very vulnerable, very big brain development time. Why do these positions pay so poorly? It's ridiculous. Okay, so moving on. Don't mind me. So, Jamie talked about the STARS program. That is a quality rating improvement system. They exist all over the country. Ours is modeled similar to some other places. And the pre-K program and the early learning standards and so on included credentials of teachers and included partnering with programs that could meet these standards. Unfortunately, although we've had this program for 5 years, but getting these things off and started with not quite enough money to get the job done and so on is a little slow process. We have less than 300 programs in 300 child care facilities, including some Head Starts, in this program in the state of Montana. There are many communities that don't have any at all. So those communities would have Head Starts could be a partner too, but if they don't have somebody, a program that's advanced in STARS, they don't have a community partner. And the governor's budget included $2.4 million of state money to continue our investment in STARS for these 300 programs, and it was a fight. I spent a lot of time in Helena, and so did others, trying to keep that money. And we were successful late in the session, but we can't expand it. We don't have more than 300. Okay, so, and of those, you needed to be star 4 or 5. We only have 6 of those in the entire state. So child care centers, while they may be delivering great services, doing a really good job and so on, they aren't in this program, or they haven't been able to work themselves up because it's time consuming and keeping everybody trained and getting everybody moving in the right direction. So we have a system to do it. We don't have enough investment in the system, and we are not quite ready. And yet, parents are wary about putting very young children into public schools. They want a community-based program, which schools are, of course, but they want a smaller program for some children. And one of the reasons we got full-day kindergarten finally passed is that it allowed parents to save money on childcare. When your child goes to school for a half a day, you still pay for a full day of childcare. Because if your kid is there 5 hours, you pay all day. So if kindergarten didn't start right away, and it was 2.5 hours. So children needed a full day of childcare, the transport in the middle of the day. It was a nightmare year for parents. And that is, in my opinion, why we got strong backing. Beyond the brain development, beyond all the stuff that a lot of us think of, parents said, please, please, not only is it expensive, I got to leave my job in the middle of the day to transport my kid to childcare, because childcare doesn't transport, and the bus doesn't transport them to their childcare. So that's a problem. Okay, so it's my strong belief that all child care facilities should be in STARS. The federal government has imposed some important standards for training, pre-service training for all caregivers, and all states have to come up to snuff on that. And Montana, I gotta tell you, is seriously out of whack with those federal requirements. So the new state plan is gonna have that. Many of those things that are required are in Star 1 right now. So in my dream world, every child care facility that is licensed is a Star 1, and then they can work to be better. If there is no requirement that you be in STARS, it's easy to, there's no pressure, there's no market pressure on the part of parents, because there are hardly any STAR facilities. And many of our STAR facilities have waiting lists. So families that are in more transitional situations and so on, they can't hardly ever get their kids into the high quality STARS programs. So if everybody was a Star 1, then many, many facilities would not want to be the equivalent of a 1-star restaurant or 1-star hotel. They would want to be better than that. They would want to be at least a 3-star. But, you know, starting at Star 2, there's financial incentives, so all that involves money. Nowhere do we, except for early childhood, do we expect parents to pay the full cost of education. Even though tuition in college is going up, even then, students are not paying the full cost. And of course, they don't pay for K through 8. There's lots of expenses for school now to be in extracurricular activities and that kind of thing. But we see that as a public investment, a public responsibility. And we don't, if you want to send your kids to private school, that's great, they exist, go ahead and do that. But we provide something. And in Montana, we provide a good public education, a really good public education for our kids. And I don't know why. It is, we believe so strongly that as a culture, that it's a private responsibility until kids go to kindergarten. So not only would pre-K not be required in Montana, Montana is one of a half a dozen states that doesn't require kindergarten. So of course we can't provide pre-K, we don't even require kindergarten. But most parents don't know that. So that's all right, most kids go. And I think, you know, as a culture, we just think, you know, kids go to kindergarten when they're 5, they go to school. So what we're doing by not having all programs in STARS is to say that licensing isn't quality. And indeed, right now in Montana, it's not. It is the bare essentials, the very bare health and safety essentials. So, but with these new federal requirements that will be implemented in Montana before a year is out, then those things are all presently in STARS. So because money is limited, the plan is really to move the bar on STARS and make more things required in STAR 1, different things required in STARS. Well, that's not my dream world. My dream world is everybody is in STARS. And I also, right now, if programs do not advance in STARS because we only have a limited number of slots, now they'll have to leave STARS. So let's say they get to STAR 3 and they can't, for whatever reason, they have staff turnover so they can't move it along or something, then they're gonna have to leave STARS. But personally, I think STAR 3 is better than no STARS, and so I would leave them there. But we obviously need more money. That would create a pipeline for us for community-based, smaller childcare partnerships with schools where some kids really need a full day, full year program. The 180 days of school for part day is not going to work for some families, and they would like to have something different. You know, at my job, if I needed to pick a kid up at kindergarten in the middle of the day, I could work that out. But if I am a retail clerk or I am a certified nursing assistant, I don't have that option to go transport my child midday. Okay, so those federal changes are really great, and I very much support them, but they came with no money, because at the national level, we've been trying for 17 years to get this Child Care Development Block Grant reauthorized, and we were always trying to get more money. So at the national level, we said, okay, we'll just take the money away. We'll try to do it with these new regulations in there, and then we'll try to get money. Okay, great. So now we have an unfunded federal mandate, and now we're trying to get the money. I don't know if that'll work or not. John Phillips thought maybe some money would be coming in the new little kind of backdoor deal that's going on, so I hope that's true. Because, for example, now we're going to have to visit, and you know, I know parents probably think this happens, that the licensor visits every child care every year. Well, I'm here to tell you they do not. They do not visit every child care every year, but they're going to have to now, but we have no more money, so you see how that's a pretty big rub right there. So we'll have to keep working on that. So if we had STARS for everybody, we would indeed have a system, a continuous quality improvement system that would move programs up to be able to serve preschool, to deliver preschool as part of the state pre-K system. And I think that we would see that primarily in centers, because like in a family home that only has 6 children, they can't do age breakouts that would be appropriate to offer that kind of thing. But those kind of programs very often serve the younger children anyway, and many parents do not want to take babies to great big settings. So again, you know, it would cause some flux in the system, but I think it would be good. There is a disconnect between schools and the child care, and even with Head Start. And there is a mistrust that is born of misunderstanding and this miscommunication. And so when the pre-K initiative, Early Edge, was proposed, lots of child care people said, what about us? What about us? We're doing this. We're doing a great job out here. You don't even know what we're doing. You're going to take our business away, and so on. And we have, in early childhood, we have a fear that there are going to be classrooms of little 4-year-olds sitting in little rows doing paper and pencil activities for the whole time. And we're worried about that. We think that's terrible, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want them to really have desks in rows at all in preschool, not at all. They can have tables where they can do things, but I don't want them to have little desks in rows. I want there to be a little place to cuddle up and have a book, and, you know, a little art area over here, more like a child care looks like, or a preschool, because that's what's developmentally appropriate. So one of my colleagues, who is a former director of a child care, sent her kindergartner to school a year ago, and he goes to a low-income school in Missoula, in a neighborhood where I lived for over 15 years. She was so excited for him to go to kindergarten. She's very, you know, a big believer in education. She's, by the way, on the school board now in Missoula, so I'm very hopeful about that. But she asked her little guy what he learned, you know, what they did in kindergarten, what he could tell her. Here's what he told her. This is what we learned, really important. First thing we learned today. Put our 2 fingers like this and go like this and walk down the hallway on this tile that's in the middle, the dark tile in the middle. Don't touch the hallway. Don't get outside of the dark tile. That's what her 5-year-old learned in the first day of kindergarten. I don't think that's appropriate. It looks like convicts walking down the hall. And I don't like it, and I don't want any kids to do it. That's ridiculous. There's a better way to contain the enthusiasm and exuberance of small children without doing a perp walk down the hall. So she was kind of unhappy about that. And and the former superintendent did hear about that, and now she's on the school board. So I'm really hopeful. So that kind of stuff, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but there is a better way, and early childhood people are committed to that better way. So I'm very hopeful about this preschool through 3rd grade competency, because I don't think in that realm that kind of thing is going to be supported. And I don't know where it comes from, but it does just make me a little crazy. So so schools often see childcares. So we early childhood people think schools are too academic, they're too rigid, they're too structured, there's too many tests, and I think most teachers think there's too many tests too. That's something that's got to change. But and the business of this subject came up about performance-based funding and so on. In early childhood, we're interested in looking at the performance of the teachers. We're not very interested in looking and assessing the performance of students. We want to assess how teachers interact with children, how teachers engage children, and work with teachers to make sure we do better. And in STARS, actually, there are some assessments on the social and emotional interactions of teachers with students, with the kids. And they move up in STARS based on that, not on the assessment scores of young children. So we're interested in the sequencing of education, of topics and subjects, not benchmarks of children that are that young. And so there is a disconnect there with the school system. And again, I think most school educators realize kids are on a continuum. They advance here, they're not as advanced here. We have to feed their aptitude while helping them with these other things that are harder. But the system itself and a lot of the No Child Left Behind stuff gets in the way of that for teachers and schools. And so early childhood people are anxious about that. And, you know, early childhood people, a lot of them don't have these degrees. Why? Because the job doesn't pay well enough to keep them. And you know who's not at this table? Preschools, unlicensed preschools. I don't even know how many of them there are in Montana. Maybe one of my colleagues out of Great Falls would, because they have this database that has that in there. But that's a lot of the people who were opposed to early ed were these unlicensed preschools. A lot of them are faith-based in, you know, churches, 3 mornings a week, 3 and 4-year-olds. Some of them are very good, but they're not licensed. So we don't know anything about them. We don't know how many people are enrolled in them. We don't know what their health and safety standards are. We don't know if they do background checks of their teachers or what the credentials are of their teachers. It's a completely unregulated system. And because so much of it is faith-based, there has been a complete hands-off policy on the part of our legislature to do anything about that. And frankly, I don't think public money, tax dollars, are going to go into a system that has no regulations at all and no oversight at all. So if these excellent preschool programs would like to play in the public preschool environment, then I think they need to embrace regulation. And then I'd be happy to talk to them when I'm in charge of the universe. Okay, so we're really, then I want to talk about why the children I'm most concerned about, the very vulnerable, low-income, high-risk children, are not many times in a quality program. If they're not in Head Start, then they're using, and even if they are in Head Start, they might be using the Best Beginning Scholarship Program to access childcare for that wraparound piece, or their parents work non-standard hours, so they need evening, weekend, and so on. So most high-quality childcare facilities charge a slot rate. They say, you know, we are not selling an hour of service here. We're not selling even a day of service. We're selling a month of service, and it's this much money. The Best Beginnings Child Care Quality or Subsidy Program pays an hourly or a daily rate. And it's not as much. It's at the 75th percentile. So the higher quality facilities, they charge more and they stabilize their income by charging a slot rate. Why do they do that? Because they can predict their income. They don't have income going like this, and they can commit to their staff and their facility and their supplies and everything. So some of the children, the lower income children, they can't access this program because they can't commit to the monthly rate. They can't pay the difference between what the state pays and the rate of the facility, and the facility cannot afford to accept less. Now, if they're in the STARS program, they do get that enhancement. But just speaking for the Missoula area, a lot of our STARS programs really have very few low-income kids in them. They're going to have to, as part of STARS, to have more. But the facilities that have, say, 40, 50, 70% low-income kids are not in STARS. And they are a long way, a lot of them, from the quality we would like to see for our most vulnerable kids. And the kids are in those programs. The revenue stream to those programs is unstable, it's less, and so it just obviously can't pencil out, to deliver that quality of care. So that's just a problem that we face, and it's not just Montana's problem, it's a nationwide problem. And a lot of those high quality programs, they have waiting lists as well. So you gotta get on a waiting list. It might be a year, 6 months before you can get in there. So again, those subsidy kids are gonna go to one of these lesser quality facilities. And when I talk to parents and I ask them what they think, do they like their child care program? Initially they all say, oh yeah, it's wonderful. And I know where they take their kid, and I'm thinking, not really. But as I talk to them a little bit more, what I realize is parents cannot bear to leave their child somewhere that they think is not safe. They cannot walk away and bear that, so they don't actually allow themselves to know it. But then as you talk to them a little bit more, they say, well, I worry that blah, blah, blah. Oh, I worry, and so actually parents are anxious all the time about whether or not their kids are going to be safe where they are. But a lot of them are not able to do that. And so a lot of our kids are, they're in kind of questionable places. Okay, so we need to have a commitment, not just on paper, but in practice, to a mixed delivery system. It can't all be in the schools or we'll never make it fly. Some states use a percentage, that a certain percentage of the slots or a certain percentage of the classroom have to be in the community. The greater metro Denver area limits the percentage of facilities that can be school-based. They fund faith-based programs, but they are all licensed and they're all in the quality rating improvement system in Denver. So we need to, if we don't do that, child care providers and preschools will resist it and make it hard for us to get it done. And parents who don't want to send their kids to school at age 4. And a lot of parents who are low income, not all of them certainly, but a lot of them, they didn't have a good experience with school. So their relationship as a parent of a student is going to be off to a kind of a anxious start. And so we'll want to look at that. And we need to recognize that many kids need full day, full year services, and that the school year part day thing is only a part of the solution, and we need to be thinking about that broader picture. Mike asked about how many kids need care. 2/3 of Montana's children under 5 and under, their parents are working. So 2/3 of that 60,000 are in some kind of out-of-home care. So it's a lot of kids. So we need a strategy to invest public money in pre-K, including private childcare, including Head Starts, preschools, small programs that aren't school-based that will help us serve all of the children so that all of the children have access. And I am very supportive of the idea of rolling out a few at a time, not trying to do the whole district. There's a lot of schools in some of these communities. It'd be very hard to get it done. And we need a strategy to underwrite infant care as well. And that will make it more feasible for programs to offer that infant care and help fill up slots that are currently that might go into a public school system. And then to just address this letter that the Republican legislators signed and sent to our congressional delegation. I do not believe that a business that pays its workers barely above minimum wage, which is what happens in childcare and preschool, has an inherent right to exist. I don't think that of box retail, of any other kind of job. I think people have to make enough money to survive. We have a lot of childcare providers, teachers, who are on the childcare subsidy program because they make 150% of the federal poverty level or less. So they're eligible for the service. Okay, so that doesn't really work. So we need to talk to those business owners about how the wages for the very, very important work that they are doing will be improved by partnering with the school system for pre-K, so that they can be fairly rewarded for this important work. And that always requires a credential, always. A decent wage almost always requires a credential. And so that's where we're going.
Thank you, Kel. In summing up, what I heard was that for the last 150 years, we have been increasing support to families for the care and education of children. We're at another decision point right now, and so we're not starting from scratch. And because we're not starting from scratch, we already have existing policies. Those policies, as Joe pointed out, are being stretched to accommodate local needs in some cases, but more different policies may be needed. There, as Kurt pointed out, needs to be a disruption, or there is being a disruption to the status quo. That status quo needs to include all stakeholders, as Kelly has pointed out, but not throw away the baby with the bathwater, as our other distinguished guest, Mary Jane, has pointed out. So there's tension points. There's tension points in facilities. There's tension points in children lining up, and if we had more time, I have another story to that, but I'll tell you later, Kelly. There is hope for schools. There's change in the cultures of preschools versus the first through 12 grade systems. And that needs to be addressed. But there is hope. There is hope, for example, by changing incrementally, by including all stakeholders at the table, by locating all the stakeholders on this issue, and communicating, and communicating, and communicating.